Thank you very much, Pete, for your presentation. I am now pleased to introduce Eddy Rudram. Eddy is from Thailand/UK and is the Communications Officer at Youth Lead in Bangkok. Currently, Eddy is managing the YKP COVID-19 Emergency Relief Fund, a grant scheme aimed at supporting youth-led initiatives at the time of COVID-19 for YKPs and PLWHIV across Asia and the Pacific. Eddy's presentation is titled Youth Perspectives on U equals U Communications.
My name is Eddy. I'm with Youth Lead. Thank you so much for having me here to talk on youth perspectives on U equals U communication. I guess I'll just get right to it. So this is going to be the outline for my presentation. There could have been many directions I could have taken this with, but I consulted with young people before making this presentation to make sure it was incorporated youth perspectives. And after the discussions, we found that there was two key thematic areas that was worth highlighting. So I'll be talking about U equals U campaigns and language as the first part. And the second part will be about why U equals U communication is important for young people. So just to provide a little bit of context behind HIV language, as we all know, language is an extension of communications. Language is a tool that we use in communications, and communications is how we transfer messages, and it's the process of transferring messages. We know that there has been a shift in the language used in the HIV/AIDS space. What was appropriate terminology in the past may not be appropriate terminology today. And we recognize that it's because of language that we are able to understand other people and understand ourselves. I think at some point in our lives, we would have had words or language negatively impact us. I mean, for example, if we use terminology like transsexual or AIDS orphan, prostitutes, these are all negative language that we shouldn't be using, and we know that. But often at times it does come up and it does impact us negatively. So if you understand that from the perspective of a young person who is living with HIV or is surrounded by negative HIV language and the discourse and the narrative, they could grow up feeling a little bit out of place, feeling not accepted. So this could be a huge issue for young people if the HIV narrative and the language does not change. Okay. Undetectable equals untransmittable. Now that is not an easy concept to say. It's 12 syllables. Just imagine a young person who is not a native English speaker trying to say this concept it's going to be quite hard. But we have seen now around the world that people have adopted U equals U into the local context so that it becomes more relatable to that given locality. So I think this now brings me to the examples of campaigns, which is the first part of my presentation. Here we see examples of campaigns. We see campaigns that are actually taken from the West. These photos were actually taken from preventionaccess.org, which is a website that collects information on U equals U and also campaigns. It's a very good website, check it out. But these campaigns are taken from the West. We can see that they're very engaging. You use people, actual real people in the campaigns. The letters are bold and there's lots of color. It's very inviting. So these campaigns actually do very well in kind of communicating what U equals U is. And some of them even go on to explain more in detail what is U equals U without just actually having the letters U equals U right there. But I think it's also important to notice that not all campaigns are in English, obviously, because the whole world doesn't just only speak English. So it was nice, sorry. Now I'm going to provide you examples of non-English campaigns. What's interesting to note here is that in countries like Brazil or in Vietnam or in Germany, they've adopted different concepts. So, for example, in Brazil, it's I equals I, not U equals U. And in Vietnam, it's K equals K. So I actually spoke to a young person who was actually involved in the K equals K campaign. And he said that the campaign did very, very well in addressing stigma and discrimination. It also promoted and encouraged people to get tested, which was great. And it also kind of promoted adherence as well for young people who are living with HIV. I think this really kind of shows that it's important for campaigns such as You 'Cause You to be adapted into local context, just so that the campaigns can be relatable to the audience. Because like I said, You 'Cause You, it's not an easy concept to understand if English is not your first language. So it's important to bear that in mind when we're looking to move You 'Cause You from English campaigns to the local context. One thing that it's worth pointing out is the language that is actually used in the campaigns. Unfortunately, I can't go back, but I can explain that if anybody noticed, that in the English campaigns, you might have seen these types of terms used. The science is clear. Facts are facts. You cannot pass HIV. It's zero risk, effectively zero risk. We see this type of terminology used because it's a standard campaign strategy to make sure that the You 'Cause You campaign aligns with the general HIV language. So it's to make sure that everyone's on the same page when it comes to talking about You 'Cause You and HIV, and to make sure that the messages are clear, it's concise, and it doesn't deter away from the general HIV language that sometimes we often see, which is to the right, such as infected or infection, HIV infected, unprotected sex. These are sometimes the language that we often see in campaigns, which are not true. And as we know now, as people who work in the HIV space, that this does promote stigma and discrimination. So it is important to change language. It's important to change how we communicate information on HIV. As we already know, the language can stigmatize HIV and the people living with HIV. It can isolate people living with HIV from the greater public. But for a young person who's growing up and surrounded by these myths and false stereotypes of HIV, which are also reinforced by the media and social environment, it can have adverse effects on the way that they understand HIV, and it can deter away young people essentially from even just getting tested. So I think that You 'Cause You campaigns do work very well to address stigma and that surrounds people living with HIV. It uses terminology to deflect misconceptions and false stereotypes about HIV. And it also promotes positive language that we should be using when we discuss people living with HIV or people are affected by HIV. So why is communication on You 'Cause You important for young people? It promotes testing, it promotes HIV treatment, and it talks about HIV in a way that young people can understand. There are 3 things that I want to highlight as important areas. There are many more, but I think there's just 3 that I want to highlight for now. You 'Cause You has an enormous benefit in reducing stigma and discrimination, and it can motivate young people to get tested, to stay on treatment. For this, it's important for us to raise awareness and promote the knowledge of You 'Cause You within the healthcare sectors and the communities and the people living with HIV, because a lot of young people still are not aware of the You 'Cause You concept. And as a result, I think that it should also work to address the internalized stigma that young people have. Someone living with HIV, they often engage in social avoidance, so they don't want to get married or have children or have sex. It's because they feel like they're different from everyone else. So I think You 'Cause You campaigns can really do well in addressing stigma and discrimination. And with the other 2 issues I want to bring up is adherence and empowerment. I think with adherence, I think we all know that there is poor ARV adherence among youth. And You 'Cause You campaigns can have a great role in achieving and maintaining viral suppression. ARV adherence is often impacted by poor social support, such as low ARV self-efficacy, advanced HIV disease, psychological distress, depression, substance use. These are all factors that can really play on a young person's adherence. And I think You 'Cause You, if it's promoted by healthcare sector workers and the community, I think could go a long way in improving adherence. And the last one is empowerment. I think You 'Cause You is empowering because it can unite young people together and get them to act as agents of change. It can really take away the shroud of fear that exists for young people, feeling like they're different. So You 'Cause You has the ability to kind of mobilize young people to become agents of change within the HIV movement. So a lot of communication should focus on empowering young people as well. I've listed some recommendations or some ways that we can improve communication on E equals U. One of them is communication that empowers young people living with HIV to become agents of change, and I've already said that. Communication that promotes testing for young people and young key populations. Communication that encourages adherence for adolescents and young people living with HIV. Communication that addresses stigma and discrimination, false stereotypes and myths on HIV. And communication on U equals U that is youth-friendly and easy to understand. Because like I said, it can be a very difficult concept to understand. So we need to find easy ways to kind of communicate information on HIV and U equals U in a way that young people will take that on board and actually talk to other young people too about U equals U. But more importantly, it's about creating content that relates to younger audiences. If we examine the different languages that we used in the campaigns, we should be using them as well in this region, not just in the West. But also there are challenges to that. You know, we are in the Asia Pacific region. We're not going to be able to see campaigns with two men sleeping side by side anytime soon. That's just not going to happen yet. Well, I hope it changes one day. But it does go a long way. Because, for example, if I saw a campaign on LGBTQ acceptance, that's going to do a lot to bring up my self-confidence. It shows me that the people are supportive, I feel included, I don't feel left out. It really goes a long way. So the way that U equals U campaigns work for young people would do the same thing. It would make them feel included, it will bring up their self-confidence and self-esteem, and it will make it seem like there's a form of normalcy in their lives and it doesn't take them away from feeling different. So just in summary, I mostly talked about language and talked about the campaigns with U equals U, and hopefully everyone here gets an understanding of the ways that we can improve how we work with young people, whether it's within service delivery or even just facilitating a workshop. There are different ways that we have to, other things that we have to consider when we're working with young people, or if we're trying to communicate messages with young people. Not that because they're not going to understand it or they lack of knowledge or something, but it's the way that it has to relate to them. Otherwise, the campaign just fails because he doesn't know the audience. Young people often slip through the cracks. So it's important for us to bring more attention to how we work with them and what it is that we're trying to communicate with young people. For a young person, this can be empowering, and it can allow young people to take charge of their lives without fear.